Good morning. Hi, Dean. So we can have the enthusiasm of Dean this morning. Ready? Good morning. All right. Thank you. I'm Laura Ettinger. I use she, her pronouns, and I share leadership of today's service with Reverend Bran Lennox. Whoever you are, wherever you live, whomever you love, whatever you do for a living, you are welcome at the Unitarian Church of Harrisburg. We invite you to join us for coffee hour following this morning's service, either downstairs or on Zoom. Online or in person, we're so glad you're here. We affirm our mission to encourage, equip, and empower, and we ask that you join in the affirmation of our covenant with one another. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and service is our gift. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Chosen to bring ourselves here to this sanctuary to gather as a community of faith. We join together in solidarity as a covenanted people who are drawn together by the promise of connection and the mysterious pull of the unanswerable. We draw on experiences of love and of wonder to lift our hearts and move us beyond the mundane. As seekers, wanderers, Appreciators of nature and creators of connection, our paths have converged today so that we might become present to the spirit that is worship. And so let us worship together. Each week it is our tradition to light a chalice which casts a circle of light to hold us all. As we ignite anew this symbol of our shared faith, let's reflect on these words from Mary Sheldon. Light of love, word of life, kindle our chalice today. Set our hearts ablaze with your pure and radical love. Help us to a faith that can heal the sick and feed the hungry masses. Be with us now. Help us to welcome the refugee, to stave off the slaughter of innocents. Show us your mercy. Help us to see that from the smallest, the humblest, the least of these burns the brightest star. On this third week of Advent, the waiting time in the Christian calendar, when we begin to anticipate the celebration of the birth of Jesus, we light a candle of joy with this prayer, which recalls the Christian roots of our Unitarian Universalist faith. This blessing is by the Reverend Elizabeth Mount. Beautiful Mother of Creation, you who imbue every facet of this universe with the spark of all being, teach us to find joy. Help us to open our hearts wide enough to let in the wonder of miracles, the anguish of suffering, the blessings of compassion, the beauty of truth. Help us to know that our hearts and our fists are of the same size, that the work of our hands must always be guided by the love of our hearts. To not only speak truth in the halls of power, but to sing out for the joy of change and of justice. In the true belief that someday this world can become a beloved community that holds us all in care, we light this candle of joy.
Good morning. Today's story is titled Refuge by Ann Booth and illustrated by Sam Usher. So we all know the story of how Jesus was humbly born in a manger, but Refuge is a lyrical depiction of what came next. The new family's travels through the desert, fleeing Herod's soldiers in order to find a safe place to welcome their son into the world. This is a poetic and refreshing look at the classic Christmas story that's never been more relevant. Refuge asks readers to consider the modern-day implications of being forced to flee your home country. Refuge. The man led me, and I carried the woman all the way to Bethlehem, and the baby was born. The shepherds came first, and after them came the kings. When the last king left, the smell of frankincense lingering in the air, we all slept, and the man had a dream of danger. He woke long before the sun rose and told the woman. She took the baby and kissed him. She smelled his sweet baby breath and felt his soft, warm baby skin and how his lashes tickled her cheek as he sleepily nuzzled her neck. Time to go, she said. They wrapped him up warm and kissed him again, and the man came to get me. He patted me between the ears and led me out. Come on, old friend, we're off on a journey again. And we left some gold for the innkeeper, for he had been good to us when others had not. And we set off. Under starlight, through empty streets, whilst people were sleeping, hoping for the kindness of strangers again. And we passed the shepherds in the fields, and there were whispered blessings and the movement of sheep in the darkness and the clasp of rough hands, and the love of warm hearts. And I kept walking, carrying my precious load, and the woman held the baby close to her heart. And she and the man talked about journeys and dreams of warnings and the love of a baby and the kindness of strangers. And when we rested and they were frightened, they took hope from each other and from the baby's tiny first smile. And we entered into Egypt, and we found refuge. And then I'm supposed to say the end. But I wonder, is it?
Some of you may know that I grew up Catholic, part of a large, extended Roman Catholic Italian family. My dad was the middle child of 7, like exactly in the middle. Just imagine, three below, yeah, no. So I had access to aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents who all lived within a 20-mile radius of each other for most of my childhood. My grandparents rented their house from the church most of us attended and lived across the parking lot. So I would see my cousins nearly every Sunday, as many of us would find our way over to Grandma and Grandpa's after services were over. Our Catholic faith was a very important part of extended family life. It was especially so to my grandparents. My love for them and my family meant that I subscribed to their faith as well. There were pieces of the faith that were helpful to me growing up. Having a mother figure in the idea of Mary, Jesus' mom, was really nice for a kid who had a terrible relationship with her mom. But what I was really drawn to most, that I didn't identify until much later, was the community of people, including my family, and being part of something bigger than myself. And we were taught that Catholics had it right. We were a part of the one true religion, and as a kid, that made me feel lucky and special and safe. What I didn't realize until much later was how othering, meaning how exclusionary, that was to anyone who didn't think or believe as I did. And I didn't understand that excluding people based on faith was wrong, because some of the most loving people I knew stood behind that way of thinking. I find myself reflecting on this quite a bit, especially lately. This tribal way of being in the world, how humans tend to stick with the groups of people that allow us to feel included and safe, even if, maybe especially if, those groups keep others out. The other, people who look, love, or pray differently. Borders, either physical or philosophical, are drawn so that people on the inside don't have to experience the unfamiliar, so they don't have to hear the others, so they can ignore intersectionality. I'm sorry, did I say they? I meant to say we. So we don't have to hear folks who may fall outside of our circle, so we don't have to readily acknowledge our interconnection. Saying they, as I just did, implying that the collective we in this room is a different type of human that is superior to the humans I was describing, is othering, drawing a line between an identified us and them. So how do we move beyond that? How do we stop viewing one another as other? Is this something we really want to do? I will freely admit, and would be a hypocrite not to do so, and many of you could call me out on it who read my Facebook posts, that, you know, that there are folks who I do not want in my circle, who I view as toxic and perhaps a threat, who I want to protect myself, my loves, and vulnerable folks from. I don't need to love these folks. I don't even need to like or respect them. I can be angry and I can push back against harmful ideas and ideologies, but I cannot deny their humanity, because to deny their humanity is to deny my own. For better or worse, being a human on planet Earth means we are in this together. The inequities are large, but by actively choosing to humanize rather than other, I can help ensure I'm not contributing to more gaps or widening existing ones. So how do we move past othering? There are a few things to do, ideas I'm actively working on integrating into my everyday life. We can take to heart our 7th principle that asks us to hold true respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. One underlying implication of this principle is none of us are free until all of us are free. What affects one of us affects all of us. This is applicable to suffering and celebration. We can choose to find the joy in that interconnection. For me, I'm most alive when I feel connected to the people around me. I'm also working on being more mindful with my words. Words seeking to be radically inclusive of folks who have been routinely and intentionally othered. Words and the use of words certainly can be tricky. Language is tricky and evolves over time. Words can be wielded with love and truth, or they can be weaponized, as we have seen so much. In my professional writing, if I'm referring to the people who live and work in Pennsylvania, for example, I'll choose to say resident rather than citizen, to ensure that I'm including everyone, regardless of their citizenship status. We're all both players in and at the mercy of the systems we live in. One way we make change is changing the way we speak about systems and each other. At UCH, we've chosen to swap out the binary words sister and brother with sibling and neighbor in our hymns to make sure everyone here knows you belong and are included and accepted. Perhaps one of the most important things we can do, we can make the choice every day to adopt and incorporate the idea that every single human being deserves a chance to thrive, not just survive. Imagine a world where everyone, regardless of income, race, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, had what they need each day to be able to live into their potential. They had enough food, safe and comfortable housing, clean air and water, health care, education, resources to take care of basic life requirements, and the ability to contribute their talents in a way that is meaningful to them, which would transcend them and reach everyone around them and beyond. Too many humans never have a chance to explore life in this way because they're unable to move beyond basic survival, and this is through no fault of their own. Making the choice to adopt the idea that every human deserves a chance to thrive requires putting aside judgment. It requires analysis of the type of snap judgments we might make without even realizing it. This is something I've wrestled with quite a bit. It is incredibly seductive to believe that somehow people deserve whatever bad things befall them, because then if I just make a different choice, it can't happen to me, right? No, it can. by adopting a mindset that everyone deserves to thrive and working to that end is all-inclusive, we would eventually get caught up in that good work that improves life for everyone. Bringing this back to the story I started with, what helped bring me away from an exclusionary belief system was seeing so much good work happening by and on behalf of others outside my bubble. People who didn't look or think or believe or love like me. I saw secular organizations and other faiths building community. Of course, there's more to the story than that, but I don't think you want a 10-hour church service. So I'll leave it at that. The work of extended community and outreach. Others with a dream of a world that worked for everyone, those things are powerful. Inclusivity, community, listening, breaking down barriers, these are the things that bring us through to the other side, over our borders, together. May we find our way and may we find joy in the connection.
Join me in the spirit of reflection and meditation. This prayer was written by Maureen Killeran. Not gold, nor myrrh, nor even frankincense would I have for you this season, but simple gifts, the ones that are hardest to find, the ones that are perfect, even for those who have everything, if such there be. I would if I could, have for you the gift of courage, the strength to face the gauntlets only you can name, and the firmness in your heart to know that you, yes, you can be a bearer of the quiet dignity that is the human glorified. I would, if by my intention I could make it happen, have for you the gift of connection, the sense of standing on the hinge of time, touching past and future, standing with certainty that you, yes, you are the point where it all comes together. I would, if wishing could make it so, have for you the gift of community, a nucleus of love and challenge to convince you in your soul that you, yes, you are a source of light in a world too long believing in darkness. Not gold, nor myrrh, nor even frankincense would I have for you this season, but simple gifts, the ones that are hardest to find, the ones that are perfect, even for those who have everything, if such there be. When blossoms flowered amid the snows upon a winter night, was born the child, the Christmas rose, the King of love and light. The angels sing, the shepherds sing, the grateful earth rejoiced. The grateful earth rejoiced, and at his blessed birth the stars their exaltations voiced, their exaltation voiced. Venite adoremus, venite adoremus, venite adoremus, Again the heart with rapture glows to greet the holy night that gave the world its Christmas rose, the King of love and light. Let every voice acclaim his name, the grateful chorus swell, from paradise to earth he came, that we with him might dwell, that we with him might dwell. Venite adoremus, venite adoremus, venite Now is the time when we engage as a community in the sharing of our joys and sorrows, our concerns and milestones. When we join together to hold each other in support and in celebration, we deepen our sense of interrelationship. We may find our sorrows eased and our joys magnified. I invite you to share them now through writing them on a slip or typing them in the virtual chat. Please indicate whether your message is okay to share out loud. You can also honor whatever you are holding in your heart by placing a stone into the water of community. Please come down the center aisle, returning to your seats by the side aisles. Spoken or unspoken, our hearts join with yours in carrying all that life brings. I place one final stone in our fountain this morning in honor of all of those who could not join us today and all those around the world who are celebrating or mourning at this moment in time. Thank you. Our Caring Connection Committee writes, please hold Linda Holzhauer in your mind and heart as she recovers from a severe respiratory infection. Karen Baker shares a joy with us this morning. Karen says, thank you for your generous donations of toiletries during November. Gather the Spirit was very grateful and said it was the largest and most diverse donation they have ever received. Karen and Ed Sykes share, It is with great joy that we are able to welcome our son, Jonathan, home from his deployment to the Middle East recently. We are so grateful for his safety and that we can spend the Christmas holidays with him and his family. Thanks to all who have offered their support to us during this difficult time of his time away from home. And an anonymous note this morning. This community member writes, I seek the refuge of the health insurance I need, and a part-time to help me get this fundamental need. For all that has been shared and those many concerns we hold deep in our hearts and yet remain unspoken, we journey with each other in love. Let's share a moment of stillness together now.
The Unitarian Church of Harrisburg is, as always, an intentionally gathered congregation of freely thinking, loving people. The church is created, sustained, and supported by us. Each month, we share half of our Sunday plate with a local nonprofit organization, as you just heard. For the month of December, we're sharing with the Harrisburg Area Food Pantry. Formerly known as the Ecumenical Food Pantry, the mission of the Harrisburg Area Food Pantry is to support those in the greater Harrisburg area experiencing food insecurity, primarily by providing emergency food assistance. If you wish to contribute online, you can visit uhbg.org and scroll to the bottom of the page for giving options. Your financial support and commitment matter. Please consider giving what you're able.
We dedicate these gifts to the work of this congregation, weaving a tapestry of compassion and action, faith and fellowship, hope and wholeness. Jesus said, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. And then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? And the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these siblings of mine, you did for me. For a nation so heavily influenced by Christianity, it seems we've strayed awfully far from the teachings of a man who lived and died for the message of radical compassion. Somehow we have become so afraid of each other that the recent winning presidential campaign was run largely on promises to close our borders. The US is not alone in this either. The UK has become notorious for their xenophobic legislation, even as those same attitudes are causing catastrophic collapse within British society. And now countries across Europe are pushing away Syrian asylum seekers following last week's regime shift. So how has it come to be that the followers of a man who was himself born a Palestinian refugee, who preached to welcome the stranger and transcend the illusions of separation, have become some of the most ardent supporters of nationalistic rhetoric today? When I find myself thinking about two sequential phenomena and struggling to understand the connection between them, I've developed the practice of asking the question, what happened next? Drawing a line from Jesus' preaching to build the wall and the Muslim ban requires us to ask that question many times. Jesus died. What happened next? Slowly, his followers picked up the pieces and formed the early Christian movement. What happened next? Rome burned down in 64 AD, and Emperor Nero blamed the early Christians, kicking off a couple of hundred years of persecution and brutal martyrdom. What happened next? Emperor Constantine had a conversion experience and made Christianity the official religion of the Holy Roman Empire. What happened next? The Council of Nicaea convened, formalizing the Christian church, and at the same time, introducing political motivations into the formal beliefs of the religion. What happened next? Martin Luther got fed up with the financial greed of the Catholic Church and sparked the Protestant Reformation. What happened next? Christopher Columbus landed in America, beginning a new era of colonial expansion as well as missionary efforts. What happened next? Splinter groups and sub-denominations formed within Protestantism, leading to the spread of Calvinist theology. What happened next? The British Crown established Anglicanism as the national religion of England. Puritans, dissatisfied with the policies adopted during the English Reformation, were alienated from British society and began to look to American shores as potential refuge. What happened next? Tired of facing rejection and persecution from their national churches, North American colonizers established freedom of religion within the developing nation. Unfortunately, these folks were primarily thinking of themselves at the time. What happened next? 19th and 20th century American history, largely. The establishment of racial hierarchy among immigrant groups, labor and internment camps, the status of whiteness being tacitly granted to light-skinned Christian minority groups like Irish and Italian folks over non-Christian ethnic groups such as Jews and Arabs. Notably, the Cold War entrenched a reactive emphasis on religion out of the American fervor to reject communism, which inextricably linked American Christianity with capitalism. What happened next? Reagan and his successful dehumanization of Haitian asylum seekers. Bush, Oil in the Middle East, 9/11, economic incentives for wars sold to the public under patriotism, nationalism, and protection of the American identity, all while whipping up fears about followers of Islam. I don't need to go into what happened next because everyone in this room probably remembers it. I also clearly didn't cover every factor along this 2,000-year journey, but hopefully we have sketched out a rough map here. Today, ICE and the immigration detention system break up families, destroy lives, and generate huge profits by creating opportunities to exploit what amounts to slave labor. The cruelty of the system is only surpassed by the incentive to perpetuate it. So that's my general understanding of how we got here. And looking at this sketch, I think it does make sense. It's awful, but it makes sense. Add on to all this the fact that everyone on all sides constantly picks and chooses and reinterprets Bible verses to suit their own agenda. The Christian congregation has the potential to become a very receptive audience for bigotry. I want to pause here and say, I have no condemnation for Christians or the Christian faith as a whole. I have known lovely people of all denominations, including the most notoriously conservative, who have used their faith as inspiration to do good in the world. I have also known non-Christians who have been bigoted as hell. And truly, it's not about Christianity. Religious nationalism always results in acts of persecution. There have been brutal crusades in the name of Buddhism. Hindu nationalism has been and continues to be the source of astounding human rights violations. Need I continue? Religion is a galvanizing power within communities of people. It's a tool with a lot of potential. And it can be used to bring people into alignment with the sorts of values we here tend to agree with, and also the sorts of values we most ardently reject or even fear. The biggest flaw, and one which we must continuously be aware of, is that religious community, by nature, encourages an in-group, out-group mentality. Us and them thinking, like Laura was telling us earlier, it does to our relationships what placing matching poles together does to magnets. And it places an automatic limitation on our ability to do good. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe in building a bigger table instead of a higher wall. But we are called to help immigrants and refugees not because we are Americans and they are third worlders and it's noble to rescue them. We welcome immigrants and offer aid because they are human beings, and their existence and thriving makes all of our lives better. Because extending privilege is necessary for equity, and equity is a foundational part of the path which liberates everyone. This is a skill that can take labor to learn in a society which rewards hierarchical separatism and societal stratification. We often lack comfort with or even awareness of our neighbors who may differ from ourselves. Growing up in a staunch white northern suburb and then spending the majority of my young adult years in New England, I learned and internalized the practice of avoiding acknowledgement when passing by strangers. You're in a grocery store, pushing your cart down the aisle, and someone is approaching from the other direction, so you look away and pretend they're not there. This may seem normal and innocuous, but what it really is WASP culture. An absence of warmth learned from the rigidity of whiteness and cultural Protestantism. You also tend to go out of your way to ignore strangers. I am certainly not saying that you are at fault for the failings of our society. I am saying that you should be aware of the cultural context around it. I only discovered this by moving from New England to Oakland, California, and then Baltimore, which are cities occupied by majority people of color. You know what folks in Oakland do when they pass each other in the street? They look up, they nod or smile and say, hey. And if you want to not be rude, you say hey back. And it may or may not surprise you to know that by default, I tend to be terrified of people I don't know. But a funny thing happened when I adapted to the practice of greeting strangers. I became a lot less afraid. Passing strangers didn't make me tense anymore. I started to notice that every person around me is a human being with their own life, their own fears, their own kindnesses and flaws and preoccupations. Many of my neighbors come from families so dehumanized by American society that the coldness of non-acknowledgement comes across as an insult. A warm greeting becomes a way of saying, I see you as the inherently worthy person you are. The smiles I exchanged with my neighbors became genuine over time. I started to recognize people in my neighborhood and slowly started to feel like I was part of something. I've come to know that we are not just enriched by our connections, we are safer because of them. I will stop to help a neighbor in need, and my neighbor will stop for me. The truth is that those who fear the foreigner mainly do so because they have been taught radical individualism and to fear their neighbor. They have learned all their lives to be on alert for those different from themselves and to keep themselves separated from anyone who might be outside the fold. This is all in service of the divide and conquer technique, which maintains and steepens the hierarchies of our society. We must close our borders, they hear, because what we don't know desperately wants to hurt us. And this paradigm is isolating beyond belief. When we say we're working for collective liberation, it is to liberate these fearful folks right alongside the rest of us. Okay, so upon reflection, we understand a bit more about the world we are living in and the people around us, perhaps. But what on earth are people like us supposed to do about this? We are so small, and we are up against 2 millennia of history, a huge wave of religious nationalism, and a slew of greedy, influential individuals with disproportionate amounts of power. Where can we even begin? I feel this too. This helplessness, and I don't have all the answers. I can offer some places to start. First, I would suggest that if you don't already, try to smile and say hi to people in public more frequently. It makes a bigger difference than you might think. And second, notice when you are speaking or thinking using us and them language. Whether the them group is made up of folks you want on your team or folks you are struggling against, experiment with speaking in a more interconnected way. Instead of the homeless population in Harrisburg is suffering, how can we help them? We might consider homelessness is causing considerable suffering in Harrisburg. What needs and efforts can we contribute our energy towards? With whom can we be a team? Instead of we American citizens have the responsibility to change our country by organizing the electorate, we might consider those of us who are American citizens can use that status to empower the efforts of our whole community towards improving conditions. For my fellow white folks, instead of talking about people of color as though they weren't in the room, use your voice to amplify the experiences shared by community members and educators of color, and consider how your words include or exclude non-white listeners. Similar principles apply to cisgender people and trans voices, for example, or currently able-bodied folks and disabled narratives. The distinctions are subtle, but simultaneously immense in impact. This work is urgent, and we can't afford to leave anyone out of the conversation. I'd also encourage all of us to remember that we don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to progressive initiatives. There are lots of existing organizations out there which are working toward the world we believe in. Whether or not you are able to contribute your time or money, it's good to know what's around so that you can spread the word and create deeper connections. Now, just make sure that you've done your due diligence and that you are endorsing organizations who are doing more good than harm. Occasionally, a group will seem ethical on face value, but some of their attitudes are misguided enough to elicit some critical thinking on our part. For example, there are some very, very well-known charities which ring bells and collect change in red buckets this time of year. You know what I'm talking about? And when they go on to use that pocket change to discriminate against LGBTQ folks. So be discerning. Whether or not you follow a Christian theology, this Christmas season is a good time to remember the life and teachings of this one individual who has had such a far-reaching impact on our world. We can grieve the way that Jesus' story has been co-opted by those who have twisted his teaching to bigoted, discriminatory, and power-hoarding purposes. And we can also find it in ourselves to follow his example of radical compassion. Remember that when we do something kind for one another, Jesus would say we are honoring the very being of God. And take heart in knowing that if a humble refugee born in a time of great turmoil and injustice managed to inspire a revolution founded in love, each of us has the power to inspire at least a bit more love in the world around us when we lead by example. Until a day when all the walls come down and we live in solidarity with every nation, we will return tirelessly to further the liberation of each of our neighbors. May it be so. Will you rise with me so we can join in singing? These benediction words come from Jonathan Merritt. When you think of faith as a war to be won, you will see people as enemies to be conquered. When you think of faith as a world to be explored, you will see people as neighbors to be loved.
My rituals all discombobulated.